The unexpected call in a distant galaxy, far beyond the reach of any known human spacefaring civilizations. The Xalathians were facing a nightmare they couldn't escape. Their homeworld, once a thriving hub of life and prosperity, was now on the brink of collapse. A dangerous anomaly in the core of their planet had destabilized the environment. Storms raged, volcanoes erupted, and the atmosphere itself was beginning to fracture. It was only a matter of time before their world became uninhabitable. In a last-ditch effort to save their people, the Xalithian leaders made a decision. They would reach out to the stars, hoping to find a race advanced enough to aid them. They didn't expect much, but at this point they had nothing left to lose. Desperation had set in. They sent a distress signaler, simple call for help. The message was clear, but the hope behind it was fragile. We are the Xalathians. Our world is dying. We need help. Anyone who can hear this, please respond. The signal was broadcast to the deep reaches of the galaxy, unsure whether any civilization would even pick it up far away. In the dark abyss of space, the human race was thriving. Humanity had long since left the cradle of Earth behind, building vast fleets of starships capable of exploring the cosmos and making their presence known to any species they encountered. They were strong, advanced, and prepared for anything the galaxy could throw at them. What the Xalithians didn't know, however, was that their distress signal had reached the wrong ears. The message wasn't intercepted by some distant alien race, but by humanity itself. It was a simple mistake, one that would change the course of history forever. At a deep space communication station on the edge of human territory, an operator heard the faint transmission. He listened intently, puzzled by the strange words. "Who are these beings?" he muttered to himself. There was no immediate response, and it wasn't clear what kind of help they were asking for. But one thing was certain: the distress signal was meant for someone else. He knew better than to ignore it. After a few moments of hesitation, the operator reported the message to his superior. The higher-ups didn't think much of it at first. A strange transmission, perhaps another attempt by a long-lost civilization to communicate. But as they analyzed the message, something clicked. "This signal, it's from another galaxy," one of the officers said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's a cry for help. We need to investigate." And so, a decision was made. Humanity's fleet would respond, not because they were asked to, but because the galaxy itself had extended an invitation. It was a call they couldn't ignore. Within hours, a small but formidable fleet of human warships was assembled and prepared. For launch, the order came straight from the top. The fleet would journey across the stars to answer the Xalithians' plea. Whether it was wanted or not, as the fleet gathered, the Xalithians were unaware of what was coming. The first human ships were just a speck in the distance, but as they moved closer, their size and power became unmistakable. The Xalithians watched in awe, and a creeping fear began to set in. They had not expected this. They had hoped for help, but not in this form. Humanity's ships weren't here to rescue them. They were here because of a mistake. The Xalithian leaders had no idea who these humans were, but they quickly realized that their desperate message had triggered something far greater than they could handle. The fleet of human ships, massive and imposing, began to surround their planet. The Xalithians had never seen anything like it. Ships the size of mountains, gleaming with power, ready to do something that no one could predict. The fleet captain, a seasoned human general named Commander Riley, stood on the bridge of his flagship, scanning the Xalithian planet below. His orders were simple: investigate the situation, offer aid if needed, and secure whatever resources were required to sustain humanity's growing empire. It wasn't a mission of mercy, it was a mission of opportunity. Riley turned to his crew, his face cold and focused. "Prepare for contact," he commanded. "We need to know everything about this species. What we do next depends on it." The Xalathians, meanwhile, were scrambling. They didn't know whether to be relieved that help had arrived or terrified at the sheer scale of what was unfolding. The arrival of the human fleet wasn't just a chance for salvation, it was a turning point that no one had prepared for. Their simple call for help had been heard. Yes, but it was now clear that the humans were not the saviors they had hoped for. Instead, they were the storm that would change the galaxy forever. The Xalathians had made a mistake, one that might very well cost them everything. As the human ships descended, the Xalathians braced themselves for whatever came next, unsure of whether they had made their final plea for help or just unwittingly signed their own doom. The stage was set for a confrontation of unimaginable scale, and neither side knew how it would end. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was something else entirely. A power beyond their imagination. As the human fleet continued its approach, the Xalathians watched in awe and trepidation. Their once tranquil planet, now ravaged by the harsh storms and seismic tremors, was being overshadowed by the massive presence of humanity's warships. They had thought their plea for help would bring them salvation, but they had never imagined it would come in the form of such overwhelming force. The first human ship that entered the Xalathian atmosphere was a colossal battleship, its sleek, metallic surface glistening like a blade under the twin suns. It moved with an unnerving grace, yet its presence sent a chill through the Xalathian capital. The warship, the Icarus, was the flagship of the human fleet, and it towered over anything the Xalathians had ever seen in their millennia of space. Exploration within the Icarus, Commander Riley stood at the bridge, his fingers gently resting on the arm of his command chair. The view of the planet below was displayed on a large holographic screen, but Riley was not mesmerized by the view. His thoughts were focused, calculating. His orders were clear: observe and assess, and if necessary, take control. He was not here to rescue. He was here to decide the fate of an entire civilization. "We're in orbit," Riley's second-in-command, Lieutenant Delaney, said, looking up from her terminal. "The Xalathians have begun transmitting again. They're requesting a diplomatic meeting." Riley gave a curt nod. "Not yet," he said, his voice firm. "We're not here to talk. Not yet. I want the entire fleet in position before we make contact." The crew of the Icarus worked quickly, following orders with precision. The other ships in the fleet, all impressive in their own right, positioned themselves in a strategic formation around the planet, blocking any potential escape routes. The Xalathians, who had once been a dominant force in their corner of the galaxy, were now faced with a reality they had never considered: a civilization more powerful than their own, ready to make a move. Meanwhile, the Xalathian leaders gathered in their underground command center, a sprawling complex designed to survive the ongoing planetary disasters. The walls trembled as another volcanic eruption rocked the surface, but the leaders remained seated, grim and focused. They had hoped for help from a species with compassion, understanding. Instead, they faced humanity's raw power. "Do you think they'll help us?" the High Elder of the Xalathians asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," said Zalen, the military commander of the Xalathian forces, looking up from the holographic display. "But I'm certain they're not here to rescue us. We made a mistake." The communication officer interrupted the tense silence. His voice panicked. We've detected their fleet, and it's massive. It's not a single ship, it's an entire force. The Icarus alone dwarfs anything we've ever built. Zalen clenched his fists. We need to negotiate. Now. The Zalithian leaders made a hasty decision. They would offer everything they had to secure humanity's favor. What else could they do? Their planet was dying, and they had no other choice but to surrender. But even as they prepared to send a formal communication, they knew they were facing a force far beyond their comprehension. The human fleet was not just here to help, was here because of a single, fateful mistake. The Zalithians' message for aid had unknowingly reached a powerful, ambitious civilization that saw no reason to offer help unless it benefited them. The Icarus was the first to respond. As Commander Riley's voice echoed across the communication network, a deep, resonant tone reverberated through the walls of the Zalithian command center. Zalithians, Riley's voice boomed, calm yet intimidating. We have received your distress signal. We've analyzed your situation and have decided to offer our assistance. However, before we discuss terms, understand there are no more favors in this galaxy. You will provide us with everything we need, or we will take what we want by force. The Zalithian leaders exchanged glances, fear in their eyes. What had they done? In their desperation, they had asked for the wrong kind of help, from the wrong kind of species. Humanity wasn't here to rescue them, they were here to claim. Riley's words hit them like a slap across the face. The decision was made. The Zalithians had invited a force they couldn't possibly control. The only thing left now was to figure out how to survive. Commander Riley, please, we beg you, the High Elder's voice crackled over the communication line. We did not mean for this to happen. We only wanted to survive. Please, we are willing to negotiate anything you want. Commander Riley's eyes narrowed as he listened. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to secure humanity's future. We'll be in touch, he said coldly, cutting the transmission. Back. On the Icarus, Riley stood silently, staring at the planet below. He knew this was just the beginning. The Zalithians had made their call, and now, humanity would make its claim. The Zalithians were not just facing an environmental disaster, they were facing an entirely new kind of war. A war where they were not the victors, but the victims. Their fate was now in the hands of a species that had no mercy. And humanity wasn't just here to offer help. Humanity was here to conquer. Asterisk, the clash of intentions as humanity's fleet hovered ominously above the Zalithian world. The Zalithians found themselves on the edge of a precipice they hadn't seen coming. They had imagined that the arrival of such a fleet might bring a resolution, or at least a path to survival. But what they hadn't prepared for was that the humans would not just bring aid, they would bring power. The Zalithian leaders, gathered in their now trembling command center, watched the human fleet from their vast window overlooking their dying world. The fleet's ships were lined up in perfect formation, like the teeth of a massive cosmic beast. The Zalithians could do nothing but watch as their planet became a mere speck beneath this incomprehensible might. I don't understand, High Elder, Lyria said, her voice a whisper of disbelief. Why did they come? They could have ignored us. Why answer a cry for help with such overwhelming force? Her hands trembled as she grasped the edge of the council table. Across from her, Henalot Salonis' face hard with the burden of leadership, looked out the window, deep in thought. They came because they had no reason to ignore us. They didn't come to save us. They came because we made a mistake. This is no rescue mission. This is a message, Zalen replied, his tone as sharp as a blade. We begged for help, but what we've received is a lesson in our own weakness. The tension was palpable as the room fell into a heavy silence. It wasn't just the Xarlithian planet that was dying, it was their pride, their place in the galaxy, their very sovereignty. Suddenly, a new transmission arrived, this time directly from Commander Riley. His cold, unfeeling voice filled the room, his words precise and commanding. "Xarlithians," Riley began, his voice smooth but firm. "I hope you've had time to reflect on the situation. The aid we offer will come at a price. You will provide us with the technology you have developed, the resources you still possess, and the loyalty of your people. We will help stabilize your planet, but not out of the kindness of our hearts. You will join our empire, and you will serve us, or the consequences will be far worse." High Elder Lyria gasped, and the Xarlithian council members exchanged nervous glances. To ask them to surrender everything they had worked for, everything they had built, it was unimaginable. Their entire way of life was now being dictated by the arrival of these humans. They had no choice but to accept the terms, though their hearts sank in despair. "We can't allow this," General Zaylan said, fists clenched. "We can't give up everything, our knowledge, our people, our culture. This is not just an alliance, it's a complete subjugation." Lyria turned to him, her expression filled with helplessness. "What choice do we have? We are dying. The planet is dying. The humans hold the power now, and they know it. Any resistance would be annihilated. We have no allies left, no options." Zaylan's face darkened. "Then we must find another way. We must not give them our planet so easily. We'll stall them for time. Perhaps we can still find a solution." But as much as Zaylan hoped for a way out, deep down, he knew the truth. There was no solution. The humans had already made it clear this wasn't just about saving the Xarlithians. This was about domination. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Icarus, Commander Riley paced in front of a large holographic screen that displayed the Xarlithian homeworld in all its fragile glory. The fleet was in position, ready to enforce the terms of their agreement. Riley's mission was simple, and the stakes were secure humanity's place in the galaxy, and make sure that the Xarlithians knew who truly held the power. His second Lieutenant Delaney, stood beside him, watching the holographic map. "Commander, they're stalling. We haven't received a formal response yet. They know what's at stake. They'll have to comply." Riley stopped pacing and turned to her. "I don't care about their compliance. I care about one thing, our position in the galaxy. They're weak, Delaney, and weakness must be dealt with." The flickering lights of the fleet's engines illuminated the cold, calculated expression on Riley's face. "Prepare for the next phase. If they don't comply soon, we'll begin with the resources we need. The rest will follow." Meanwhile, the Xarlithians were scrambling. They knew their time was running out. As Riley's words echoed through their communication system, the reality of their situation became undeniable. They had called for help, and now humanity was using that very plea as leverage to extract everything they could. They had no choice but to play along for now, hoping for a miracle. But every Xarlithian in the room knew it was already too late. The confrontation had shifted from a desperate plea for survival to a political struggle that would determine the future of the Xarlithian race. The humans weren't here to be their saviors, they were here to claim their prize. And what a prize it would be. The Xarlithians, once a proud and dominant force in the galaxy, were now nothing more than a pawn in humanity's greater game. The moment had arrived. As the transmission ended, Riley's voice cutting off the last of the Xalithian leader's hopes. One thing was clear: humanity had come to stay, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Xalithians were not just facing an environmental collapse anymore. They were facing a complete collapse of everything they had known, and it was humanity who held the power to reshape it all. The stage was set for the final act. Would they surrender, or would they fight? The clock was ticking, and every second that passed brought them closer to an answer they couldn't avoid. Humanity's reckoning, the Xalithian capital, was a place of ancient grandeur, now crumbling under the weight of both nature's fury and the oppressive presence of the human fleet. High Elder Lyria stood at the grand windows of her council room, watching the endless line of human warships hovering above her planet, their cold steel hulls reflecting the dying light of their twin suns. The once proud Xalithian civilization, now teetering on the edge of oblivion, was at the mercy of the very species they had mistakenly called upon. The human fleet loomed like an unstoppable force, dominating the skies above them. The ships weren't just there to offer aid. They were there to take what they wanted, and the Xalithians knew it. The message was clear. There was no rescue. There was only submission or annihilation. As the days passed, the Xalithian leaders were forced to make difficult decisions. They attempted to negotiate, to stall, but every time they spoke, Commander Riley's voice echoed back to them with an air of cold indifference. The humans were growing impatient. They didn't want words, they wanted action. Their fleet was waiting for the first sign of Xalithian compliance. If that didn't come soon, the consequences would be devastating. Back on the Icarus Commander, Riley was calm, yet his mind was sharp. The Xalithians had failed to understand that humanity didn't simply come to save. They came to conquer. They came to expand their empire. And this planet, this civilization, was the perfect foothold for that expansion. Riley sat at his command chair, staring at the holographic display of Xalithian infrastructure, mapping out their most valuable resources and the key areas that would provide humanity with the leverage they needed. "Lieutenant Delaney," he said, his voice firm, "have the extraction teams ready. We've given them enough time to make a decision. If they fail to comply, by the end of the day, we begin the first phase." Delaney looked up from her console, her expression cold. "Understood, Commander. We'll be ready to move." The order was simple, and its implications were clear. Humanity wasn't just after the Xalithians' technology or their resources. They were after control. The galaxy had long been a chaotic place, with countless species fighting for dominance, but humanity was different. They didn't come to negotiate, they came to win. And the Xalithians were about to learn that the cost of their desperation was far greater than they could have ever imagined. On the surface, Xalithian civilians were beginning to panic. They had never experienced anything like this outside. Force so powerful and relentless, a species that had come to claim what was theirs without hesitation. There were rumors of resistance, of factions forming in the shadows, but no one dared to make a move. The fear was too great. What could they possibly do against a force that had already shown its power? In the council chambers, Lyria and the other leaders were gathered in quiet deliberation. They had few options left. Their planet was dying. Their people were scattered and divided. And now they were faced with the reality that humanity would not simply walk away. They had to make a choice. "I'll say it again," General Zaylan spoke, his voice tight with frustration. "We cannot bow to these humans. There must be something we can do. We can't let them take everything from us." Lyria turned toward him, her face a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "Zaylan, we have no choice. We've tried everything we can. They're not here for our help, they're here to take control. This isn't just about our planet anymore. This is about our future." As a species, Zaylan slammed his fist onto the table. "Then we fight. We don't surrender. If we let them do this, we'll never be free again. We've survived wars, catastrophes, and invasions. We're not going to give up now." Lyria's voice softened as she looked at him. "And what would you have us do? We're outnumbered, outgunned. We're fighting a battle we cannot win. This isn't about pride anymore, it's about survival. If we don't give them what they want, they will wipe us out." Zaylan stood silent, the weight of her words sinking in. He knew the truth, but admitting it was a bitter pill to swallow. The Zalathians, once proud and powerful, had no choice but to surrender. The transmission came in abruptly, cutting through their moment of hesitation. It was Commander Riley again. His face was emotionless as his voice crackled through the speakers. "Zalathians," Riley began, "I've given you more than enough time to make your decision. Your planet will be spared, for now. Your people will survive, but only under my terms. This is your final warning. If you do not comply, I will have no choice but to take what we need by force. Make your choice." The transmission cut off, leaving the Zalithian leaders in a stunned silence. The time had come. They had to make their move, but there was nothing left to do but to comply. The cost of resistance was too great, and they knew they couldn't risk their entire civilization for a futile fight. Reluctantly, Lyria turned to Zaylan, her voice heavy with the burden of the decision. "We surrender," she said. "We will comply with their demands." Zaylan's face twisted with anger, but he said nothing. The Zalathians had lost. Their call for help had brought about their downfall. They had mistaken humanity for saviors. But in the end, the humans were not here to save them, they were here to rule. Humanity's fleet was now the master of the Zalathians' fate. And as the human warships began to move into position, ready to extract the resources they had come for, the galaxy watched in silence. The Zalathians had made their call, and humanity had answered on their own terms.